the extremist Jews are going to do a policy of extermination, utterly wiping out the Arab population. I'm not saying that they're going to succeed, but they're going to work to utterly wipe out the Arab population in Israel. That's what I think is going to happen. And they're going to be butchering and butchering and butchering, and they're going to kill civilians. And then you'll have the Palestinians also doing terrible things. But the mafia amongst the Palestinians will say, we got to protect our people. So the mafia will say, hey, the police are not helping you. The military is not helping you, but we're going to help you. And it's all going to be a part of this horrendous conflagration that is just going to accumulate into the destruction of Israel. And I think this is going to be one part of the entire torrent of blood that will end as the destruction of Israel. And I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone a number of days ago, and he asked me about my thoughts in regards to the denouement or the end of Israel. And I explained it to him. And I thought maybe I should do a video about it, but since I've talked about this subject numerous times, I thought maybe I'll just bring it up in my live stream. If you see what's going on, for example, with Turkey, for years, Turkey has been talking about punishing Israel. For years. You can go all the way back to 2008 with Operation Cast Lead, in which Israel butchered close to 2,000 people, most of whom were civilians, many of whom were children. After Operation Cast Lead, Turkey said, we can't allow that to happen again. And Turkey told the Israelis to be more restrained when doing military operations in Gaza. Turkey wanted to show its strength to the Israelis by sending a flotilla, the Marmara flotilla, the infamous Marmara flotilla. And the flotilla was just a big boat that was carrying humanitarian aid, and they wanted to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza. And what happened was the Israelis sent in the special forces to land on the boat, and then the Israeli forces killed, 8 or 9 people who were on this boat. 3 of the soldiers were injured. I'm not sure exactly how, but 3 of the soldiers were injured. There were no guns on the Marmara, on the flotilla, but they did have slingshots, and there were knives in the boat. But again, I think there was more than one kitchen in the boat, so apparently there's going to be knives. So there's nothing really spectacular about that. But there were 3 Israeli soldiers that were injured in the fray. And those 3 Israeli soldiers were given medical treatment by people on the flotilla. The Israelis went hard on the people in the flotilla. That's why they killed several of them. But it was a way to show Turkey, you're not going to tell us what to do. You're not going to pressure us. It's not going to work. So there's been this struggle between Turkey and Israel for quite some time, for a long time. And Erdogan has made several statements. I've talked about these statements in the past, but Erdogan has made several statements on how Israel must be punished. Israel must be taken into account. Israel must be brought to justice. The Zionists must be brought to justice. And it's very interesting. You see Germany talking about sending troops into Gaza. Now, you could say, well, why are they sending troops into Gaza? Well, they say it's because they want to be there as a peacekeeping force, right? That's the idea, to be there as a peacekeeping force. Well, so let's say you have German troops in Israel. Now, it's very interesting because, and I've talked about this many times, I'll bring this up again. There is a lady in Germany, her name is Muriel Asseberg. She is considered to be the foremost scholar on the Middle East. She is considered to be the foremost scholar on this subject matter within the world of think tanks in Germany and in Europe, but mainly in Germany where she lives, where she's from. So she's considered to be influential, she's considered to be an expert, and she has talked about how Germany needs to be using its might to bring war criminals into justice. Now, she definitely considers Netanyahu to be a war criminal. And she stated in one of her papers that Germany should act against war criminals not only in countries that are not allies, but also in countries that are allies. And then she puts in parentheses, for example, the Israeli situation in the Palestinian territories. So she wants to bring the Israeli government to justice. And she's a German. She's not a Muslim. She's not a terrorist. She's not a whatever. She's German. Not a Muslim. She's a secular German. Well, I don't know what religion she's a part of. So now you look at what Germany's been saying. They've been talking about putting soldiers in Gaza. Well, imagine if you... And remember, a number of years ago, I think this was back in 2021, Erdogan stated that there should be an international peacekeeping force in Israel. Why? To protect the Palestinians. So we know that the Turks, they want to put troops in Gaza, peacekeeping force. The Germans also want to put troops in Gaza, peacekeeping force. And both of these countries have one thing in common. They both had empires that failed, and they both committed genocide. Now, if you have German and Turkish troops in Gaza as a peacekeeping force, because if you think about it, what's going to happen after this war? Hamas is not going to win. I see these articles. Israel has already lost. How? How has Israel lost the war? Israel's just pounding the shit out of this place. There's nothing there, okay? So Israel's obviously going to win, and who's going to be involved in brokering the terms, right? The terms of peace in the end. I'm going to assume the Arabs will be there, right? Maybe the Qataris, the Saudis. I think Turkey will also try to have an influence in the terms, in the end result of this whole thing, this whole conflict. And I think the Turks are going to want to put troops in Gaza. Will that happen? I don't know. But let's say that it does. Let's say you have Turkey saying, listen, we want to put troops. And the thing about Turkey is that it's in a very powerful position. It's a Muslim country. It is westernized. It is technologically advanced. And it's in NATO. And it's Muslim. So that gives a big advantage to America, because America wants to influence the world. America wants to make sure that NATO has its presence in the Middle East. And a huge key to that is Turkey, because Turkey here's Turkey, very well armed, technologically advanced. It's a first world country, and it's Muslim. And so it can do the work of NATO in being NATO's proxy, so that NATO has a foothold in the Islamic world. All right, Rasto Miltic, have a good night. Zdravo. Okay. So Turkey is the perfect candidate. Now, NATO wants to have a presence in Gaza. Right? It has to, right? If it wants to counter the Iranians, NATO has to have a presence in Gaza. How does it do that? Well, Israel, right? Israel will be NATO's presence in Gaza. But you see, you have the Iranians who are very influential in Gaza. You have the Iranians. America doesn't want Iran to have any sort of advancement in the Middle East. That's why America was so interested in Syria, because Assad has been an ally of the Iranians, an ally of Hezbollah. That's why the United States under Trump allowed Turkey to park itself in northern Syria. Well, they say it was to fight the Kurds. It was there. It was allowed so that NATO could have a presence in Syria. That's the obvious truth. So NATO doesn't want to have Gaza be a little satellite for Iran. Doesn't want that to happen. So, and again, the Gazans, they hate the Jews. So they hate the Israelis. Obviously, they hate the Israelis, especially after now. Especially now. So Turkey could come in and say, well, we want to put soldiers in Gaza. We're Muslim, right? Turkey is Muslim, so it can be a strong ruling force in Gaza because, well, it's NATO, but it's not Israel, it's not Jewish, it's Muslim. Oh, okay. So that would be more compatible, more fitting for Gaza. So that would be Turkey's presence would make it easier, theoretically, for NATO to have a presence there. And so you would have, my opinion is that, and this is what I'm foreseeing Turkish troops in Gaza. And they'll be there as a peacekeeping force. Germany, it looks like, also wants to put soldiers in Gaza. Well, Germany, they're not Muslim. And they're allies with Turkey. And they're very diplomatic. Germany has also been a major donor to the Palestinians. And Hitler is very popular in Gaza. I hate to say it, but there is a popularity for Hitler in Gaza. And my face keeps pausing. But Hitler is popular, so maybe, German troops being there, they'll say, hey, Germans, you're the good guys. Thank you. And let's say you have now a German-Turkish force in Gaza. Well, are they going to... what happens when a ceasefire is broken? Because a ceasefire is always going to be broken in these sorts of situations. So what's going to happen? Is Turkey going to what? What's Turkey going to do if a ceasefire is broken and Israel starts bombarding Gaza? Well, now Israel's going to have to be very careful. Are they going to hit NATO troops? We can't allow that. And maybe, let's say one day Israel hits a Turkish soldier. What's going to happen? Israel hit one of our guys. What's that about? And remember, the entire Islamic world is calling for a hero. The entire Islamic world is calling for a hero to end the Zionist butchery of the Gazans. And what's going to happen if a ceasefire is broken, and it will be broken, and then you have Turkish troops, possibly German troops in Gaza? Are the Turkish soldiers going to defend Israel? Is Turkey going to defend Israel? So in a situation like that, NATO's going to be saying, hey, Turkey, you're supposed to be on our side. Why aren't you defending Israel? Turkey has its own imperialist motives, and they don't care about NATO. Turkey doesn't care about NATO. Turkey cares about reviving the Ottoman Empire and promoting neo-Ottomanism. That's what Turkey wants to do. That's why Turkey has its own Turkic NATO. That's why it has its own little Turkic confederacy consisting of Central Asian countries. And even Hungary is a part of the confederacy, which is very fascinating. So Turkey has its own ambitions. It wants to control the Caspian Sea. It wants to control Central Asia. It has this aspiration of uniting the Turkic countries under Ankara or Istanbul. It has its own aspirations. It has its own grandiose ideas, its own envisage of power. And if you have crossfire between Gaza and Israel, and Turkey is in the middle, what's Turkey going to do? Turkey, is Turkey going to fight the Israelis, or is Turkey going to defend the Israelis? Well, because Turkey has its own aspirations of being this ruler in the Islamic world, it's going to want to be the hero for the Islamic world. And it can't be a hero for the Islamic world if it's going to defend Israel. If such a thing were to happen, Turkey would essentially be breaking away from the NATO system, from the NATO way of doing things. Because the NATO way of doing things is what? Israel is considered a NATO ally. It's a part of the NATO sphere of influence. That's not going to work for Turkey if Turkey is in Gaza and Gaza is being hit by Israel. And from there, again, this is theorizing here. I'm not theorizing, I'm theorizing. This is theology. And at that point, a conflict would more than likely break out between the Israelis and the Turks. And Israel's screwed at that point. Israel would be utterly screwed at this point because you have Iran, you have Hezbollah, you have Turkey. And let's talk about the Iron Dome, because everyone talks about the Iron Dome like it's this giant Viagra for Israel. It's not Viagra for Israel. The Iron Dome is just erectile dysfunction. They call it Viagra. They call it Cialis. It's more like the little rhino pills you get at the gas station. It's horrendously overblown. It's not this powerful preventative force that the Israelis want you to think it is. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to read to you guys an excerpt from Norman Finkelstein's book. Give me one moment, okay? So let's get into the Iron Dome for a moment here. Let's get into the Iron Dome for a moment here, because if Turkey is in a war with Israel, let's say Turkish soldiers are in Gaza, they're there as a peacekeeping force, and let's say a missile gets fired into Israel, or the other way around, Israel hits a missile into Gaza, who knows? Regardless, the ceasefire is broken. And the ceasefire, it does not matter what is agreed upon after this war, after this slaughterhouse, the ceasefire will be broken. It's just a fact. Okay, I'm not an expert. I never went to university. I'm not a professor. I'm not a geopolitical analyst. Just a guy who reads some stuff once in a while. The live stream, the ceasefire will be broken. And let's say you have Turkish soldiers in Gaza. They're going to be stationed in Gaza. I'm not saying it's going to happen 100%, but let's say that Turkey sends troops into Gaza, peacekeeping force. Let's say maybe some of the soldiers there are German. You got a little Germano-Ottoman alliance like in World War I. What happens when the ceasefire is broken? You could say, well, they'll just remain as peacekeepers. Okay. What happens if a Turkish soldier is killed by an Israeli airstrike? The whole Muslim world will be telling Turkey, you got to take out the Zionists, annihilate the Zionist state for what it's done to the Muslim people. This was truly, if you think about it, this was truly the intent of Hamas. What was the intent of Hamas in doing the massacre? They'll say, oh, it's because the Gazans were so tired of living in occupation that they did this, blah, 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 blah. That's part of it. You could say it's part of it. But that's not the entire picture. The reason why Hamas did the attack, one of the reasons, probably the biggest reason why, was because they knew that Israel would react with horrendous destruction. And they knew that that destruction of Gaza would grab the eyes of the whole world. And they knew that it would rile up the world around Gaza so that Gaza could make demands and end the occupation. In a way, yes, it's to end the occupation, but they knew that they would get the world around Gaza to support Gaza against Israel. But there was a speech that was made a year or so, about a year before the October the 7th massacre. And in this speech, it's on my YouTube channel if you want to see it, but in this speech, there is a Hamas leader who says, that this is the one issue, the issue of Gaza is the one issue that will unite the entire Islamic world. He says there is one issue that will unite the entire Islamic world, and that is the Palestinian situation. That is the bottom line. And so they knew we're going to do a massacre. They knew that the Israelis would respond the way they are responding now. They knew that the world would have to support Gaza. Much of the world has been supporting Gaza. They knew that the entire Islamic world would unite against Israel. They knew that something big will have to happen against Israel. That's the bottom line. That's why they did it. That's why Hamas did this massacre. The end goal wasn't to kill Israelis. That's a means to an end. The end goal was to get the response that they're getting now so that they can rile up the Islamic world, rile up the Ummah. And that's what's happening. That is what's happening. So who fell for the trap? Did Hamas fall for the trap by going through the gate and going into Israel when Israel let them in? Or did Israel fall for the trap by responding the way they're responding and further isolating themselves? That's the question. So let's fast forward. Let's theorize here a little bit here. So peacekeeping force, Turkey has this peacekeeping force, something like that. Or Turkey says, Israel, you better not do this thing again. And then Israel starts doing it again. In either situation, Turkey will be pressured to respond against Israel. And let's say that Turkey launches a blitzkrieg against the Israelis. And the Israelis are in their tanks, and the tanks are firing. And the Turks say, you know what, Israel? You hit the Gazans with white phosphorus, we're going to hit you with napalm. And the Turks will tell the Israelis, you want to enter into your tanks? May you enter into your tanks, and may you burn to a crisp. And the entire Islamic world will cheer. But then the Zionists, the evangelicals, will say, oh, but the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome, everyone. Okay, let's look at the Iron Dome. So Finkelstein gets into this Iron Dome issue. So it says here, so it talks about this war battle, really, that happened in Gaza. It wasn't caste-led, but it was Operation Pillar of Defense. So it says here, the armed resistance Hamas put up during the 8-day Israeli assault was largely nominal. The lopsidedness of the war was suggested by Defense Minister Barak as he boasted that, quote, Hamas only succeeded in hitting Israeli targets with a single ton of explosives, while targets in Gaza were hit with 1,000 tons. On the other hand, although that's the end quote, so Finkelstein goes on to write, on the other hand, although Israel celebrated its deployment of the Iron Dome, the anti-missile defense system did not, quote, save countless lives, unquote, and perhaps did not save any lives. Compare civilian casualties before and after Israel's anti-missile defense system became operative. The bottom line was Iron Dome effectively made no difference. So if you look at when Hamas was hitting Israel with its rockets before the Iron Dome, and after the Iron Dome, when Hamas began firing rockets after Iron Dome, Hamas's success rate when hitting targets was roughly the same. Iron Dome did not make a huge difference. So it goes on to say, if Israel hailed Iron Dome, it was because it sought to salvage something redemptive from its otherwise failed operation. Shortly after Pillar of Defense ended, MIT missile defense expert Theodore Postel voiced doubts. Quote, this is from Theodore Postel. Initially, I drank the Kool-Aid on Iron Dome, he admitted. I'm skeptical now. I suspect it is not working as well as the Israelis are saying. A senior Israeli rocket scientist subsequently rated the claims made for Iron Dome exaggerated at best. But anyway, Theodore Postal, he did research on the performance of the Iron Dome, and it says here that Postal concluded that Iron Dome successfully intercepted 5% of incoming Hamas rockets. So it says here, even accepting for argument's sake the official Israeli tally of 740 successful interceptions, it's still perplexed why the thousands of Hamas projectiles that Iron Dome did not intercept caused so little damage. And that just means that Hamas's stuff is mediocre. And then it goes on to say, but in its official post-mortem on Protective Edge, Israel reversed itself in order to rationalize the death and destruction it wreaked in Gaza. It downplayed Iron Dome's efficacy. So Israel, during Operation Protective Edge, initially they said, oh, look, our Iron Dome is so good. We blocked so many rockets. And then they had to downplay Iron Dome to show, well, so many rockets hit Israel. See how dangerous Hamas is. So Israel will praise or will deflate Iron Dome depending on the advantageousness of whichever it chooses. So it says here, but I'll rewind a little bit. It says here, Israel touted the technical wizardry of Iron Dome after Pillar of Defense in order to compensate for the operation's meager returns. It hyped it again during Protective Edge in order to soothe the jittery nerves of both its indoctrinated domestic population and would-be tourists. Israel's flourishing arms trade also stood to reap rich dividends from the Iron Dome fanfare. So in Pillar of Defense, Israel praised the Iron Dome, said, look how amazing it is. It's so good at intercepting missiles, rockets. And then it had to deflate, after Protective Edge, it had to deflate the performance of Iron Dome because it needed to find a way to make Hamas look more dangerous than it was so that it could justify its bombardment of Gaza. And it says Israel reversed itself in order to rationalize the death and destruction it wreaked in Gaza. It downplayed Iron Dome's efficacy and instead magnified the vulnerability of Israel's home front. Spewing forth one lie after another, Israel kept catching itself in the tangled web of its deceits. If its misrepresentations and contradictions went unnoticed, it was testament to the competence of Israeli Hasbara on the one hand and the bias of Western media on the other. So there you go. So in the case of a war with an advanced military like that of Turkey's, how is the Iron Dome going to play out? How is the Iron Dome going to fare in a major war with a major opponent? It's going to be very, very difficult, and that's an understatement. Israel would be done. And here's the thing about Israel. Let's say you have a war between the Turks and the Israelis, the Iranians and the Israelis, and then on top of that, let's say you have Palestinians killing Jews in Israel, and then on top of that, you have a civil war, Jews killing each other. Let's say you have this whole quagmire of death, because there's Jews who hate other Jews, and they will kill other Jews. We've seen this before with the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. How are Israelis going to escape this giant hellhole? They can't go to Egypt They can't go to Syria because they've been messing with the Syrians for way too long, and the Syrians don't like them. Can they go to Jordan? The Israelis would be stuck. Israel would be not only a conflagration of insanity, mayhem, and destruction, it would not only be a giant oven of just torrents of flames. Israel would essentially become a giant concentration camp. It would become a giant Auschwitz. And it'll be the end of Israel. And I really believe that there's going to be, and I've said this a million times, I've been saying this since 2021. I really believe that there's going to be a situation in Israel where Jews will kill each other. We've seen a little bit of that already. Because there's so much hatred between the right-wing Jews and the left-wing Jews. But also you have this rise in Palestinian criminal gangs who are pretty well armed from what I understand. But then you also have this phenomena in which a lot of Israelis are arming themselves. It's a spell for hell. That's what's happening. It's a spell for hell. And so how are the Jews going to escape? You see, how are the Israelis going to, how are the decent Israelis who want to get out, how are they going to escape? They would not be able to escape. It's going to be hell. It's going to be a giant concentration camp. Here we go. I'll read your guys some of your guys' comments here. Pentagon won't allow. Pentagon will not allow German or Turkish peacekeepers because of the possibility for Israel to kill a NATO ally. Okay. That makes sense what you're saying, but remember, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't there a Norwegian soldier who was killed, or an Irish soldier? But Ireland is not part of NATO, so that doesn't count. In Lebanon, there was a European soldier who was killed. Well, one thing that I know about history is that the craziest things happen in history. That's why they say that truth is much stranger than fiction. One thing about reading history books rarely ever talk about the mundane. They rarely ever talk about the normal things that happen in life. They rarely ever talk about the day-to-day stuff, right? What do history books talk about? The craziest stuff. Wars, betrayals, countries stabbing each other in the back. They talk about very strange and ironic alliances. And why do we talk about these things? Because they're the craziest things. They're the ones that grab our attention. So if history is any teacher, it teaches us that the most shocking things happen in points of history. And they're enough to shock the world. And so we have to not only look at life in the present moment, but we also, I think, should look at life through the eyes of someone in the future. How will people in the future look back? And what will they see when they look back? And if you just think about that for a moment, one thing that clicks in your head is that the craziest stuff happens. And we should prepare for the unthinkable to happen. We should brace ourselves for the most strangest and shocking things to happen. And remember, the United States is becoming more and more interested in just focusing on Asia. They don't want to focus so much on the Middle East as they did in the past. They don't want to focus as much on the Middle East as they did in the past. Remember what Donald Trump said. He said that the Syrian desert is soaked in blood. Who cares? Let someone else deal with it. And he gave the mantle to the Turks. Well, you could say Gaza is a Muslim. It's not really a country. You could say that Gaza is a Muslim region. It is. And Israel is going to have too much difficulty governing over it. Okay, fine. But Israel will say we want to do some governing over it because we want to put settlements. Wherever you have settlements, you're going to have soldiers. That's basically a way for Israel to advance itself militarily in a region. Just look at the West Bank. Israel, I believe, has already built various military bases in Gaza, so that's that's a presaging sign that Israel is going to build settlements in Gaza. It's inevitable. But Turkey is extremely interested in Gaza and the Palestinian situation. Again, this is an issue that unites the whole Muslim world. And so Turkey is this, think about it, it's this powerful country, second most armed country in NATO, as Joshua George pointed out. And it wants to aspire to greatness. Well, how is it going to do that? What's the greatest way to aspire to greatness in the Islamic world? Other than to just be a hero to the Palestinians. If you wanted to be the most powerful, most influential country in the Islamic world, if you wanted to grab the souls of the Islamic world, what would you do? Would you just be a puppet for NATO all your existence? Or would you be a hero to the one people that the entire Islamic world can unite under? And that is the Palestinian people. You would be a hero to the Palestinians. You would be a hero to the Palestinians. And that's what Turkey is going to push to do. And Turkey will tell the Israelis, you guys used white phosphorus on the Palestinians. We're going to show you what that feels like. We're going to make Israel into a giant Auschwitz. That's what Turkey is going to essentially say. We're going to punish you. And again, I'm not saying that this is going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 5 years. But maybe 10 years from now, we'll look back and say, damn, we saw it coming. And the whole world saw it coming. I mean, not the whole world, but a lot of people see this coming. A lot of people foresee, that Israel will be called in the future Wasreal. It's now known as Israel. In the future, it's going to be known as Wasreal. It was real, but it's not anymore.